Anyway, during the time when Grandpa Boris is telling the story, each one of the adults comes in at different times and ends up getting locked in the attic. This part of the episode is actually quite funny. Anyway, Moses and the slaves are walking in the desert. And Moses gets an idea. And he says, seeing as we're all hungry, why don't we have some flatbread? So the Chucky slave gets out the flatbread, and Moses Tommy notices how different it is. And Chucky says, well, I followed the recipe exactly. And Moses Tommy's like, well, you didn't forget to put the yeast in the dough, did you? And Chucky says, look on the bright side, we just invented matzah. So present day Angelica says, so that's where matzah comes from, and that's why I can't have cookies. And Grandpa Boris says, exactly. Mrs. Angelica has decided that she doesn't want to let her slaves go, and she comes after them on a horse-drawn carriage. I mean Pharaoh Angelica, not Moses Angelica. Anyway, Moses and the slaves soon reach a big river, and they realise that there's no way that they can cross it. But they soon realise that Angelica is behind them. So Moses raises his wand and uses his gifts to part the river. And the slaves all run through it to get to the other side. But when they're on the other side, Moses closes the river again, and Pharaoh Angelica gets swept away, and she is soon defeated. She blames this on her Cynthia Barbie type doll and says, well, Cynthia, this is another fine mess you've gotten yourself into. And soon a big whale comes up and he eats the Cynthia doll. And Pharaoh's like, hey! Then Pharaoh gets swept away. Soon Angelica's mother Charlotte comes in and says, ah, so this is where everybody is. And Grandpa Boris tells her not to shut the door. But before he can say anything, she shuts it anyway. And Chaz says, great, now we're all locked in. Boris says something along the lines of, never mind, I'll just tell you all another Jewish story. And Chaz says, you mean about how the Jews wandered the desert for 40 days and 40 nights until they reached the promised land? And Boris says something along the lines of, no, it's a story about my grandfather. Anyway, it turns out to be a story about Boris's family. And then we see the Jewish Bible saying the end, and it closes by itself. And that is the end of the episode. Overall, I really like this episode. It is not one of my absolute favourites, but I do actually like it. And out of this episode and Hanukkah, I actually prefer this one. I grew up with my grandmother telling me Bible stories, so when I watched it as a kid, the very first time I saw this episode, I remember it came on the TV and I was like, hey, it's rUGRATS and it's the story of Moses. So I was really happy about that and I really enjoyed the episode. I'm a Christo-pagan and an eclectic Christian Wiccan witch. So I am actually familiar with the story because I was raised Christian. So I know all about Moses and what it is. And like who Moses was and stuff like that. It's not my favourite episode, but it is kind of one of the best ones. It's very funny and it's very clever how they recreated this story. They did have to make some changes to it, I guess for copyright reasons and whatever, and there were certain things that they couldn't put in from the original story because it's a kid show, I guess. Well, it's a show that kids and adults watch, but you know, kids are going to be watching it, so they had to make certain changes. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. I found it very funny. It's a very funny and entertaining episode, and it has a good storyline, not only just because of Moses, but because of the adults getting locked in and everything. And I think it's a good way to teach your children Bible stories if they are being raised Christian or Jewish and introducing them into that faith. That can really help them. And they'll recognise that characters that they love in this story. So they'll like be able to relate to it more. But overall, it's a very good story. It's very fun and entertaining. I really like the storyline. I think the characters they chose to play the parts were very good. So I think it's a very clever episode. I would highly recommend watching it, and I would give it a 10 out of 10. Okay, so that's my video and my review. That's my Rugrats Passover video review. I hope that you enjoyed it and found it helpful and interesting in some way. So please post sweet comments, like and subscribe. Do not dislike or post any mean comments, because that's not very nice at all. And if you can't say anything nice, then don't say anything at all. Goodbye, have a great day, and I will see you next time. Have a Rugrats-tastic day, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, have a great day, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Goodbye. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.